And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the weekend edition of Australian Indian Radio's Daily Life Facebook post. Well, of course, it is a wonderful day out here in Brisbane once again today, 27 degrees and mostly sunny. And today we have the International Mother Day Language function happening at 11:30, which will be at the Radcliffe Square in the city. I hope to see you there if you're making it to there. Well, today, just before we begin, we know that we have this the live cast happening right here, and it goes to many channels, or it could be shared upon many groups. And I'd like to thank all the admins of the groups who share our content as well, because it is of community interest. Now, of course, there are many community groups which are specific to their groups, but also the news that's there will be of interest to someone within the group. So if there is a posting in a group, it should not bother you, because if you do not like to see that, you don't see it. Simple as that. You don't have to watch it. But there could be other people who would like to watch it, whom it might be benefit. So perhaps if someone not allowing the post to go in someone's group, what it means is depriving other members of that group of that cast. But and also anything that is posted in a group, because a group is a group, there are many people who are members of the group, and you don't have to watch it. It's your choice. If you don't have to watch it, you just skip past, you just scroll through and move on. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, let's get on with the show for today, because we've got lots to talk about. First of all, let's take a look at the top news for today.
The top stories now on Weekend Breakfast, and the tourism industry has welcomed Western Australia's decision to reopen its border on March 3rd. Quarantine-free travel will be allowed for interstate arrivals who are triple vaccinated. Case numbers are expected to peak at around 10,000 a day, with the state's premier arguing delaying the border reopening has saved hundreds of lives.
Russia is planning to hold a massive drill involving nuclear force this weekend as tensions mount over Ukraine. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres argues threats to global security are higher now than during the Cold War, as the Munich Security Conference discusses the crisis.
Millions of people in the United Kingdom have been urged to cancel travel plans and stay indoors as a second major storm sweeps through. 8 people have been killed as Storm Eunice batters parts of Europe. For the first time in decades, a rare red warning has been issued for England.
Australia is one game away from achieving a clean sweep of the T20 series against Sri Lanka. The visitors made a promising start but lost a flurry of wickets at the end of the innings to finish 8 for 139. Australia reached the target with 11 balls to spare, thanks to a 71-run partnership between Glenn Maxwell and Josh Inglis.
And of course, as I mentioned before, that this is a public post, and it goes on many different groups as well. And as I said before to members of other groups, thank you so much for sharing it with your groups. And if you are in any group and there are things that are posted on the groups that's not of interest of you, so you will just skip past that, won't you? You don't have to watch that. So the choice is yours. But I'd also like to thank everyone who joins in and says the news and provides feedback, because it's your feedback which is very important, so that we can act on that. Right now, moving on, as I said today we will look at number one, what happened in the Parliament in the week, because as we know, the Parliament's going on the break. Western Australia and what it's going to mean with those borders opening there as well. And of course, the big talk that's out there, this pandemic is going to end. Yes. So what it will look like, when will it happen? But the talks, even that today I'm mentioning the word end of pandemic, is significant. The talk is out there in the media now. And the other talk that is out in the media is interest rate. There is a tip, unfortunately, that it may rise. So all these stories coming up. First of all, after that news update, let's go right to the Parliament House, see what you have missed this week in the Parliament.
Foiled foreign what? A Labor senator uses parliamentary...
I do believe there's a risk with this deep politicisation of national security in the lead up to the election.
The Prime Minister...
We got another Manchurian,
I didn't hear it.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker, and it's on the dignity of the House, which this Prime Minister is undermining.
I'll leave the politics to the politicians, but I'm very clear with everyone that I need to be that that's not helpful for us.
It's treacherous and treasonous.
So you believe phrases like Manchurian candidate is not politicising national security?
Senator Keneally.
Is it your contention that using the term Manchurian candidate is not politicising national security?
I think they also need to be careful not to interfere in what's properly the domain of political debate and elected representatives.
So if you're looking for a Manchurian candidate, he sits over there.
The test for Anthony Albanese today is why is he opposing laws that stop us from deporting serious violent offenders? That could be armed robbery, could be serious sexual-based offending.
Anthony Albanese likes to talk about, well, whose side is he on? Well, he's clearly on the side of criminals. He just doesn't have the strength to do this stuff.
They're not interested in fixing problems here, they're interested in having a fight. They want to have a fight about this as they want to have a fight about national security because they want to distract as much as possible from their own failures.
We have deported some 10,000 people who have acted against the Australian people by committing crimes. Now those opposite, the Labor Party, the Labor leader together with the Greens, Labor and the Greens have been denying us this change for the last 1,200 days, Mr Speaker. And the reason for that is the weakness of the leader of the Labor Party.
All those of that opinion say aye, contrary no. I think the ayes have it.
Southern Cross Care decided to close 2 of its facilities, one in the mountains.
Do you finally accept that Australia's aged care system is in crisis?
Senator, I've been very careful with my language in relation to the aged care sector. I pay enormous tribute to the providers and particularly the workforce, but every time you tell them how bad it is, you're saying how bad they are. They say to me, when are you going to stop talking the sector down?
You don't think you're the scandal-plagued minister who should be resigning?
No.
With no silver bullet in sight to around the workforce, then we've had to make that difficult decision to close. We love this industry, we're passionate about it, and that's been lost. And again, the provider is cast as the villain.
Brutal but dreadful is the best way to describe the last few weeks of Scott Morrison's political life.
We have a great pretender, someone who pretends he's a hair shampooer, pretends he's a fighter pilot, pretends he's a race car driver, and pretends he's a ukulele player. Someone who acts as the Prime Minister.
Take me to the April sun in Cuba.
And a ukulele player, the Prime Minister there as well. Well, welcome everyone who have joined into the live cast this morning. It's wonderful to see you all. 27 degrees and mostly sunny right here in Brisbane. Well, moving on. So far we have seen the latest news for today, and we've seen what we have missed out there in these the Parliament in the last week or the last sitting week. Well, right now, let's go to Western Australia, where the big news is the borders are going to be opening. Let's see what.
Well, it was going to happen sooner or later. Unfortunately, it's happened sooner than the state government had wanted. COVID has made it to the west. So this chart shows all cases detected in the state, both those locally acquired and the ones linked to travel. They do all have to be now managed in the same state health system. And so from here, we're expecting to see an Omicron wave, and a wave that started in similar circumstances to the ones we saw in South Australia and in Queensland, and they both had pretty big waves. This shows you per capita case rates in each of these states, looking at the 7-day average of cases per million residents in each state. And what I've done is aligned the outbreaks so they both begin on the first day that state made it over 5 cases per million. Let's put WA on the same chart, aligned in the same way, and you can see WA's outbreak's actually growing, compared to these other ones, very slowly at the moment indeed. The other states had much more explosive outbreak. Well, it was going to happen sooner or later. It's happened sooner than the state government wanted. WA has now... It was going to happen sooner or later. It's happened sooner than the state government did want. It was going to happen sooner or later, but it's happened sooner than the state government wanted. COVID...
Well, so much for the editing there. Of course, well, we know about the borders opening from our festivals there as well, but it's going to happen from the 3rd of March. We will see how it goes. Now, the other big news is the talk that's been happening now, that when and how is this pandemic going to end?
This is what the word endemic looks like on a chart. The number of people infected with COVID-19 more or less stabilises over time, instead of showing big, unexpected surges like we're seeing now. So theoretically, a disease becomes endemic when its reproduction number, or R number, averages 1 over time. That means one infected person on average infects one other person, so the overall case burden doesn't go up or down. But it's not just about that R number. COVID-19 will become endemic when it's no longer an active crisis. That means that the level of severe disease and disruption to our lives falls down to an acceptable level. So who gets to decide what that is? It's a bit ironic that the word endemic begins with the word end, because that's not what it means at all. It actually signals the beginning of a new phase. Endemic, or endemos, means in the people. In other words, it's here to stay.
Endemic is one of those words that seems to be interpreted in different ways by different people, but the way I think about it is it's us moving from treating the disease as if it's a public health emergency to treating it like a disease that we're going to live with.
In the past century, humanity has survived a lot of diseases. The only disease affecting humans that's been completely eradicated has been smallpox. The last natural infection was in 1977 in Somalia. Then the disease was declared eradicated by the World Health Organization in 1980, almost 2 centuries after the invention of the smallpox vaccine by Edward Jenner. Before that, though, it wreaked havoc. In the 20th century alone, it's estimated 300 million people died of smallpox, but it existed long before then. Scientists estimate it could have emerged anywhere between 16,000 and 68,000 years ago. The first known victim was an Egyptian pharaoh, Ramses V, who had small markings on his cheek preserved because of mummification. But we need to be careful about drawing comparisons between how smallpox ended and what the future of COVID-19 holds for us.
Recognising the only virus so far that's been eradicated is smallpox. And we haven't even been able to eradicate polio. Polio is a far simpler virus and still we can't eradicate it. So I would say that it would require a massive global effort and it would be near on impossible with COVID.
Most diseases throughout history have never really gone away. The pathogens just retreat to the animal host or mutate at low levels. The plague, for example, the one that wiped out about 50 million people in medieval times, still infects up to 2,000 people every year today. That's because it lives on in fleas in some parts of the world. There's no clear-cut way to say when a disease is endemic. The infection rates can be high and so can the deaths.
There's not going to be one day where we go, the pandemic is over. What we're going to see is the threat the virus poses to us slowly come down. I mean, there is a decision that we have to make, and it's a bit of an uncomfortable one that everyone avoids. How much disease are we going to be happy to live with in the community while we go about living our lives normally?
The virus behind the Spanish flu that also killed at least 50 million people eventually morphed into less lethal variants. Its descendants are part of the recurring strains of the flu that do the rounds each year, making it an endemic disease. There was no clear end to the 1918 outbreak, but after World War I, people were just keen to move on, even though the virus was still spreading in some form.
Flu, which we know is circulating endemically, it is there in our population all the time, but we have seasonal peaks. We have a peak in winter, for instance, with the increased transmission of flu. So that's the trajectory that we're hoping for with SARS-CoV-2.
In addition to influenza, other endemic diseases like malaria, which infects 240 million people a year, HIV with 1.5 million new infections a year, and measles, which infects 10 million, still kill a significant number of people.
With flu kills hundreds of thousands of people each year. We make the decision that, well, we can live with that. We would rather people didn't get the flu, and we have vaccines and we have treatments.
SARS ended with aggressive quarantine measures and social controls. The outbreaks were limited to a few places, such as Hong Kong and Toronto. But that level of containment was possible because the time between infection and sickness, that is the incubation period, was very short. It took 2 to 7 days after infection to show symptoms of SARS. COVID-19 takes an average of 5 to 6 days. The key difference, though, is that people who had SARS were not infectious before symptoms started to show, but people with COVID-19 are. Containment worked so well that there were only 8,000 SARS cases globally and just under 800 deaths. The last case was in 2004. But the World Health Organization technically hasn't declared it eradicated because the disease is zoonotic, meaning the pathogen lives on in animals.
Viruses are very complicated, and we saw from SARS-CoV-2, this is a zoonotic virus. This has an animal host, and it caused such mass morbidity and mortality in humans because it jumped a host, and we were a naive population with no previous exposure and no immunity. So this is why in that jump, it was quite deadly and continues to be quite deadly.
Compared to other diseases we've faced, COVID-19 has an upper hand. Unlike SARS, it can spread by people who don't know they have it. It's different to smallpox because it can jump species. It's less contagious than swine flu, and it's less deadly than Ebola, meaning it infects a lot of people but won't run out of victims. Experts say what happens from here with SARS-CoV-2 depends on 3 major factors: how long we can stay immune to it, how quickly the virus evolves, and how well we can treat it.
Every human is different, so the immunity of one might not be the same as the immunity of another, even if they both individuals got the same vaccine.
Our immune systems can offer varying levels of protection from all sorts of pathogens, so they can stop severe illness even though they won't necessarily stop infection or transmission. A good example of this is the common cold. It's caused by 4 endemic coronaviruses. Humans are first exposed to all 4 at a very young age, usually between 3 and 5 years old. Some young children get as many as 8 to 10 colds each year before they turn 2 years old, but fewer as they get older and develop immunity to the viruses.
Absolutely, that could be how things go. But we've got to realise that, we have 4 coronavirus that cause the common cold type symptom. We also have over 100 rhinoviruses that do the same thing. So the common cold is common in symptoms, but very complicated in what virus is actually causing it.
These seasonal coronaviruses might give us a roadmap to how SARS-CoV-2 might evolve, but little is known about how they continue to thrive. One of the best studied examples, a seasonal coronavirus called 229E, infects people repeatedly throughout their lives. What's not clear is whether these reinfections were the result of fading immunity or whether the virus was changing itself to dodge immunity. Scientists collected some decades-old blood samples of people who were probably exposed to 229E and tested them for antibodies. The results were striking.
And we hope that, during those tests and those results that come out, that, something good comes out of it. And of course, it is going to be like it was mentioned in that report, that we will now have to learn to live with it and deal with it. And, life goes on with the pandemic, and it gets down to the different scale called endemic. And when it's a ratio of 1 to 1 passing on, and then we'll have to live with it. So that was one good news, that, it is looking like it might be coming towards the end, looking at all that report. The other news that is in the AFO right now, which is not a very good news for many people who have got big mortgages, is there are talks of interest rates going up. They will eventually go up. They can't remain at this rock bottom, but there are many factors such as the inflation and inflation at a sustained rate, and of course the wage increase as well, and the CPI, all that included.
Anecdotally, there seems to be a bit of a stampede toward fixing home loans. People are obviously worried about rising interest rates. Are you worried about people defaulting on their home loans as we see interest rates rise?
Look, I don't have a worry about the default rate. As long as the people have a job, there's a propensity for them to continue to pay their interest rate and their mortgage. But what we have seen for 11 years now, we've had interest rates going down, and you're now seeing the interest rates, particularly fixed rates, starting to drift up again. Most customers have a buffer and they've been overpaying on their mortgage, i.e. paying more against their principal than they would have normally, because as interest rates have dropped, we've given them the option to actually just keep paying the same amount that they were before. So they've built up a buffer within their mortgage payments as well. Our own book shows that at least 70% of our customers are well in advance of their payments. And when I say well in advance, we've got about an average of 4 years of advance payment across the average of our book, our mortgage book. So the customers are in pretty good shape. We also, when we give them a mortgage, we don't take the interest rate that they're actually being paid as the rate we think that they can afford. We add a buffer on top of that, which is an additional 3% now against that mortgage, to say if they had an interest rate rise, would they be able to afford it? So we are doing a lot of testing with customers to make sure that they can afford it, even though interest rates are higher than they are at the moment.
There will, of course, have been a lot of people, particularly in the last 2 years, who've stretched themselves because lending conditions were more in their favour. I'm thinking first home buyers here. How will they cope?
Well, I think the first thing is, if they are starting to feel that they may have difficulty, talk to their banker. And I think that's really important. We can do things early with them and help them out as long as we get the notification.
So there you go. Most of the people do have a buffer, and talk to your bank, talk to your bankers, and talk to your financial planners, and be prepared in case it goes up. And even if it does go up, it will be gradual. It is not going to be just, boom, all of a sudden it's just crept up. If it will go gradually, and it eventually will. Well, today I'd like to finish off with a bonus track for all of you with these two beautiful beauties who were right here in the studio.
इतनी सी हंसी, इतनी सी खुशी, इतना सा टुकड़ा चांद का, ख्वाबों के दिन से
Absolutely beautiful, and we will have a full show coming on one of our Music Junction segments with Aisha and Jaisa Misty. They did a wonderful program in here. Their mum and dad, of course, Mithun and Bondita did the last Music Junction, which was the Valentine's special and a couple's presents. So until Monday, it's goodbye from me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Do whatever you have to do, but always remain safe. Until Monday, it's goodbye from me.